Joe Rogan recently addressed something many people have been quietly wondering about for years. Who exactly was in Jeffrey Epstein's orbit? What were those relationships really about? And why does it seem like every time new information surfaces, the full picture only gets murkier?
I mean, you're f***ed if you just go into the island to bang hookers. Like, it's like they're of age. Mm-hmm. It's still, like, whatever he was doing, you preyed on people's desire for experiences and vice.
Yes.
And all these powerful people who, again, they can't just go call a hooker and the hooker goes, oh my God, I just blew Bill Gates. This is nuts. You know what I mean? Like, you can't trust them. They all hung out with him even after he got arrested. This is what's crazy.
That is crazy.
A lot of Bill Gates meetings with him were after he was prosecuted. And he got this little slap on the wrist and he got essentially home detainment.
When you start looking at the details closely, the picture becomes deeply unsettling. Rogan keeps returning to one central question. Just how far did Epstein's network actually reach? That is precisely why this story refuses to fade away. It is not idle speculation driving the conversation. It is the fact that every newly released document, every unsealed memo, and every familiar name that emerges seems to generate more questions than it resolves.
I mean, you gotta think, man, if a guy like that is running these kind of parties with all these rich and powerful people, how many different worldwide decisions can be manipulated because of these people and the compromises you have on them?
Right.
It's really a brilliant thing to do.
Yeah.
From an intelligence perspective. Think about all the things that people have gotten away with.
Yeah.
I mean, look at this Ghislaine Maxwell thing.
Yeah.
Ghislaine Maxwell, I've said this before, I'll say it again, she's the only person ever to be tried and arrested and put in jail for... Where's the list of the people that she's to? Well, the problem is we know that they're head of state, billionaires, wealthy people, famous people.
King's brother.
King's brother. Where's this list?
One point Rogan kept revisiting was the conviction of Ghislaine Maxwell. She was found guilty and sentenced to prison, yet there remains no publicly acknowledged, comprehensive accounting of who else was involved on the other side of those crimes. When you pause and think about that, it is striking. A conviction for facilitating abuse logically implies there were others who participated or benefited. That is not a footnote. That is arguably the most important part of the entire story, and it remains largely unaddressed. It raises the uncomfortable possibility that certain names are being deliberately kept out of public view.
So you're trying her and convicting her for a crime where if you're that means you're to someone, and if that someone is an American citizen or a British citizen, that is an illegal act. So who are these people that have committed this illegal act? Because they're responsible as well.
Right.
So who are these people? And how is there no discussion of this?
Rogan is not throwing out baseless theories. He is essentially articulating what millions of people have been thinking but have hesitated to say publicly. Where is the full accounting? Who are these individuals? And then the conversation pivots to Epstein himself, and here is the dimension that deserves far more scrutiny. This was never just about one man or one island. It was about the sprawling network of influential people surrounding him. Rogan keeps pressing about the list, the one rumored to contain powerful, recognizable names.
Well, there's no discussion because Jeffrey What's-His-Face hung himself in his prison cell.
Yeah. Which is insanely bizarre, right? That one. That's insane. Oh, the cameras just happen to not work. How convenient.
Yeah.
There's ligature marks around his neck and a fractured neck bone. No worries.
Yeah.
That's what happens when you hang yourself.
We were having a cup of coffee.
It's a very disturbing thing, but the most disturbing thing is that there's no list. Like, that's a real crime, right?
Well, isn't the story, the anecdote is, isn't it that, isn't Andrew supposed to have given somebody 12 million quid to go away?
Yeah.
And to get off the list?
Supposedly. It's hard to know whether or not that's true, but for sure there's money's been exchanged, influence has been exchanged. Maybe people are they're not throwing any bones.
When Rogan begins describing the sheer scale of influence these connections represented, the entire affair starts to feel exponentially larger. The names being discussed are not minor figures. They include billionaires, senior politicians, and individuals at the highest levels of global power and influence.
Maria Farmer, I think she was the chick who was working the front desk at his office in Manhattan. She was literally on video saying that all this about Bill Clinton on the jet, going to the island, hanging out with Trump and all this stuff. And the right-wing people, like people I know, my parents and like older folks I know in Florida, will say, you know, she came out, thank you for exposing Bill Clinton for being a p***o and doing all this stuff. And Virginia Giuffre, after this happened, she's like, you guys didn't listen to the whole hate.
Survivors like Maria Farmer and Virginia Giuffre made detailed statements on the record, on video. But the public response was selective. One political faction fixated on Bill Clinton's connections. The other dismissed or ignored what was said about Donald Trump. As Rogan and his guests pointed out, most people never actually listened to the full, unedited testimony. They heard only the fragments that confirmed what they already believed.
She's like, I was telling you that Trump was at the penthouse 3 days a week and visiting him, but you guys don't want to hear that. And it's like, you know, it's just this weird thing. Like, if you do the math, there's gotta be so many high-level, powerful people that are somehow compromised. And do I think like Clinton and these guys are? No, I don't think that at all. But if you were Jeffrey Epstein, I think it's super plausible to assume that he would try to trick them with like a girl who looks old, right? Who is possibly like on the borderline of being 18.
When you step back and consider the mathematics of this situation, the implications are staggering. Given the scale of Epstein's operation and the length of time it continued, there are potentially a significant number of high-level, powerful individuals who were compromised in some way. That does not necessarily mean every one of them was fully aware of the criminal activity. But consider the scenario from Epstein's perspective. It is entirely plausible that he deliberately engineered situations where people were placed in compromising positions, giving him permanent leverage over them.
And you say, oh yeah, this girl, she's 18, 19, 20, whatever. Meanwhile, she's like 17 and they had no idea and they have video footage. And in like a court of law, if I'm the judge, I'm gonna let them, like, of course, they lied to him. And this is not like some young girl, obviously, but they lied. Yeah. But like in like the court of public opinion, you're never gonna win in that case, right? Like if that comes out, you're fucked.
The situation becomes even more troubling when you consider the psychology involved. These are individuals who, by nature of their wealth and status, cannot afford to trust easily. They trusted Epstein precisely because everything appeared controlled and discreet. And even after his initial arrest and conviction in 2008, some of these people continued meeting with him. That detail alone is remarkable. So the question becomes not just how deep this went, but how it continued so openly for so long. And within this broader context, serious allegations have surfaced involving Donald Trump, the current president of the United States.
Newly released documents that were missing from the Epstein Files contain serious, unverified allegations against President Trump. The Justice Department posted 3 FBI memos describing interviews with a woman who accuses both Jeffrey Epstein and President Trump of sexually assaulting her when she was a teenager. The White House calls the accusations completely baseless.
Then came the release of previously unseen FBI memoranda connected to the Epstein investigation. Within those documents, Donald Trump's name appeared in connection with unverified allegations. The reaction was immediate and widespread. People struggled to process what they were reading.
This individual was interviewed by the FBI 4 times, and initially only 1 memo was released in that initial batch of documents released by the Justice Department, and that was an interview where she made allegations against Jeffrey Epstein, but not against President Trump. Now, yesterday, these additional summaries were released, and they detail the types of allegations that she made against President Trump, where she describes being introduced to him. She alleges that he asked everyone to leave the room and, quote, mentioned something to the effect of, quote, let's teach you how little girls are supposed to be, and then describes an encounter where he pushes her head down to his and then told agents she bit Trump, who then allegedly struck her and said something like, get this little expletive the hell out of here. Now, in her 3rd interview, she allegedly said that she was receiving threatening calls.
And adding further complexity, the individual behind certain claims reportedly questioned the purpose of coming forward at all. given that the statute of limitations had already expired. So the situation became a collision of allegations, categorical denials, and deep confusion, all at once. And just when it seemed the story could not become more convoluted, another development emerged that intensified the controversy. Reports indicated that the Department of Justice had actually withdrawn 16 files from the Epstein document release, removing them after they had already been made public.
Looks like the DOJ has rescinded, pulled back, deleted 16 files off their website that had been there yesterday. And again, I want to add that this was already on top of the fact that the DOJ had not released all of the files in compliance with the law. So what are the legal implications here of the fact that A, we didn't get the full breadth of files, and B, even some of the files that were released were then taken back, presumably to protect Donald Trump?
And that's what they're doing, everyone. They're federal law, a law that Congress passed, signed by Donald Trump, that said, number one, the records have to be released within 30 days, all of them. Did we get all of the records on Friday? No. So that was of law number one. Number two, it said that it has to include all unclassified records, documents, communications, and investigative materials. Have you seen any investigative materials? Have you seen any memos between the FBI and prosecutors or between FBI agents and each other? No. That would be number two. Number three, it can only redact names under limited circumstances, for example, to protect victims. We saw, Brian, pages, dozens of pages upon dozens of pages in a row of redactions. Not just names of victims, but all kinds of things. And you know whose name we didn't see? We didn't see Donald Trump's. That's another issue.
It says that the only people that have to have their identities protected are victims or minors. It was written expressly that items could not be redacted simply because they would cause embarrassment to, for example, political figures. And then when the DOJ spoke with Fox News, they said that items were redacted expressly because people were either politically engaged or government officials. And so this is in direct violation of the letter of the law. How could they not only refuse to abide by the full law, which stated that all of the files had to be released, but then completely twist upside down what the law actually says, and basically where it says you can't do something, they expressly said that they will.
Then additional reports surfaced claiming that certain documents which had previously contained identifiable names had been altered, with those names removed, including references connected to Donald Trump. Officials maintained that all procedures were being followed correctly, but the public was left with a troubling equation: missing files, withdrawn documents, extensive redactions, and absolutely no clear explanation of who was being shielded or why. And while all of this was unfolding, Bill Clinton found himself confronted by reporters demanding answers about his own ties to Jeffrey Epstein.
Any comments on the alleged allegation of your connection with Jeffrey Epstein?
Bill Clinton has been pulled squarely back into the spotlight through a congressional subpoena related to his connections with Jeffrey Epstein. Here is what is happening. Lawmakers are demanding substantive answers. They want details about any meetings, any travel arrangements, what Clinton knew, and precisely when he knew it. And yes, that includes addressing the long-standing questions about flights and visits that have been debated for years. But here is where it gets particularly interesting. Clinton is not expected to appear publicly. Instead, his legal team is reportedly pushing for a closed-door deposition. The implications of that approach are clear: less public scrutiny, less pressure, and far less accountability in the open.
We have breaking news. The deadline is here for former President Clinton to comply with a congressional subpoena to testify about Jeffrey Epstein. The House Oversight Committee subpoenaed former President Clinton and former Secretary Hillary Clinton in its investigation into the Epstein files, but the Clintons are not expected to comply. Our team has been staking out Capitol Hill. So far, no sign of the former president or his wife. And now the committee's chairman is threatening to hold both Clintons in contempt. And
if Clinton outright refuses to cooperate, Congress has the authority to hold him in contempt. That carries real consequences. People have actually served jail time for contempt of Congress. Whether events escalate to that point remains uncertain, but the institutional pressure is clearly mounting.
We know that Republican lawmakers want to ask former President Clinton about any contact that he had with Jeffrey Epstein. That includes meetings, travel, what he knew about Epstein and when. And if he does not comply, which we know he is not expected to, we could see the House Oversight Committee move to hold the Clintons in contempt. And that would escalate things quite significantly. And for example, we saw Trump allies Peter Navarro and Steve Bannon actually serve time behind bars for contempt. There's no indication that things would go that far here, but that certainly does increase the pressure on the Clintons.
Meanwhile, there remain millions of Epstein-related documents that have never been released to the public. So the current landscape includes active subpoenas, files that have gone missing, and fundamental questions that remain unanswered, all accumulating simultaneously. And you find yourself wondering, how many additional names are still concealed within all of this material? When you examine the Clinton-Epstein relationship more closely, you realize this extends well beyond rumor. There is a documented timeline that people consistently reference.
Bill Clinton features prominently in the Epstein Files. He has never been accused of wrongdoing and has said he wasn't aware of Epstein's crimes until after his death. But the pair of them, the former president and the disgraced had a long relationship.
Here's what the record shows. The connection between Clinton and Epstein traces back to the 1990s, with donations and social events where both Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell were present. During that period, there are no specific allegations of wrongdoing against Clinton, but the documentation establishes clearly that they moved in the same circles.
In 1992, records show that Epstein donated $2,000 to Clinton's successful presidential campaign, a small fraction of the $62 million his campaign raised overall. This photo was taken in September 1993, after Clinton had been sworn in as president. Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell attended an event for donors to a White House restoration.
The timeline becomes more significant after Clinton left the presidency. There were multiple trips linked to the Clinton Foundation during which Epstein's private aircraft was used, trips to Asia, Africa, and Europe. There are photographs, flight logs, and documented events where they appeared together, sometimes alongside other prominent figures. Then there are images showing Clinton in proximity to members of Epstein's inner circle, including individuals who were later identified as victims. However, it must be noted that no victim has accused Clinton of personal wrongdoing.
The event was said to have been for donors, and records list Epstein and Maxwell donating $10,000 to the White House Historical Association the same day as the event. Hillary Clinton hosted the event with Bill Clinton. Several others attended and made donations. There's no allegation of impropriety. In her recent testimony to Congress, Hillary said she did not recall ever encountering Epstein. And this was all before Epstein's 2008 conviction for procuring for prostitution.
That distinction is precisely what keeps the conversation alive and unresolved. There are documented interactions, public appearances together, and years of association, but no direct accusation. It creates an ambiguity that neither side of the debate can fully resolve.
So these unsent draft emails in this particular situation have caught a lot of attention. What do you know about them?
That's right. Well, Aaron, these two drafted emails are both dated July 18th, 2013, and they were saved in Jeffrey Epstein's email accounts. They appear to be draft emails from Epstein to itself. It's not actually clear who authored them, and there's no indication the messages were ever sent, no evidence they were shared with Bill Gates or anyone else. Now, in those draft emails, Epstein or whoever authored them makes graphic and explicit and unverified allegations about Gates. Within one email, Epstein claimed he helped, quote, get in order to deal with the consequences of with Russian girls and set up illicit trysts with married women. The email also references Gates' draft email, alleges that Gates tearfully asked Epstein to delete messages referencing an STD, writing, "Your request that I provide you antibiotics that you surreptitiously give to Melinda." It also says Gates asked him to delete explicit personal details about his. Now, a representative for Gates strongly denied those claims, telling CNN they were, quote, absolutely absurd and absolutely false. And Gates himself was asked about this by a CNN affiliate in Australia. Take a listen to what he said.
Bill Gates has categorically denied any improper relationship, calling it false, and stated publicly that every moment he spent with Jeffrey Epstein was a mistake he deeply regrets.
Apparently, Jeffrey wrote an email to himself. That email was never sent. The email is, false. So I don't know what his thinking was there. It just reminds me, every minute I spent with him, I regret and I, apologize that I did that. It's factually true that I was only at dinners. I never went to the island. I never met any women. And so, the more that comes out, the more clear it'll be that although the time was a mistake, it had nothing to do with that kind of behavior.
What also stands out, Aaron, is how much Epstein was advising Gates on his philanthropic strategy more than previously known, and it appears in at least one of those emails that Gates took Epstein's advice seriously. For instance, an email exchange from August 2014 shows Gates and Epstein discussing Gates' approach to philanthropy. Epstein wrote to Gates, I am confident that with the right approach, you'll be able to raise at least $100 billion. Everyone of hyper wealth is dealing with the same issues. How to give some away? I can see that selling yourself is not your strong point, to which Gates replied, I agree, I should not use slides or even do a presentation. I do think a bit about how surprised I am at how tough doing good philanthropy is, and what really has worked might be interesting to them. I will find a time for us to talk this week. Those were not the only meetings, according to Epstein's calendars and emails, which we went through. Epstein's email listed a dinner with Gates in December 2010, a possible lunch in February 2011, followed by a dinner in April and October 2011. The records also show a planned meeting in Norway in August 2012, another a week later, 2 meetings in February 2013, a possible dinner in September 2013 in which Epstein extended an invite to a Norwegian diplomat. We also saw a Google Calendar reminder for a Skype, a meeting with Gates in January 2014, a meeting and a phone call in September 2014.
Then Melinda French Gates spoke publicly, and it was immediately evident that this was not simply a media talking point for her. She spoke about how no young woman should ever have to endure what Epstein's victims endured. There was genuine emotion in her words. It was not political posturing, it was personal. She explicitly said the entire subject brought back painful memories connected to her marriage with Bill Gates.
No girl should ever be put in the situation that they were put in by Epstein and whatever was going on with all of the various people around him. No girl. I mean, it's beyond heartbreaking, right? I remember being those ages those girls were. I remember my daughters being those ages, right? So, for me, it's personally hard whenever those details come up, right? Because brings back memories of some very, very painful times in my marriage, but I have moved on from that. I purposely pushed it away and I moved on. Just unbelievable sadness. Unbelievable sadness, right? And again, I'm able to take my own sadness and look at those young girls and say, my God, how did that happen to those girls, right? And so for me, it's just sadness for, I left my marriage. I had to leave my marriage. I wanted to leave my marriage. I had to leave I felt I needed to eventually leave the foundation. So it's just sad. That's the truth, right? And it's kind of like, at least for me, I've been able to move on in life. And I hope there's some justice for those now women, right? We see them standing up in front of microphones in D.C.
Then came another significant revelation. High-profile figures like Elon Musk had publicly stated they had no dealings with Epstein following his 2008 conviction. But emails contained within the released files showed communications that appeared to reference social gatherings, including mentions of events on the island. Similar patterns emerged with other prominent individuals who maintained contact with Epstein years after his conviction, through meetings, lunches, and ongoing correspondence.
So has Elon Musk, yet the files contain at least 2 emails discussing just that. In one from the 24th of November 2012, Epstein writes, "How many people will you be for the heli to island?" Musk responded the next day that it would probably just be him and his then wife, adding, quote, "What day/night will be the wildest party on our island?" A year later, Musk wrote Epstein saying, quote, "We'll be in the BVI St. Bart's area over the holidays," BVI's British Virgin Islands. "Is there a good time to visit?" To which Epstein replied, "Always space for you." It's unclear if that or the other visit took place. Representatives for Musk did not immediately respond to a request for comment about the new emails. And Musk in 2019 told Vanity Fair, quote, "He tried repeatedly to get me to visit his island. I declined." And Musk, you'll recall, famously posted this during his beef with the president this year, quote, "Time to drop the really big bomb. Trump is in the Epstein Files." Minutes later, he followed up with, quote, "Mark this post for the future. The truth will come out."
The revelation that Musk was apparently still in communication with Epstein after his conviction was genuinely startling to many observers.
On the record, ranging from Howard Lutnick to Elon Musk, who in questions asked by reporters and others said that they had nothing, absolutely nothing to do with Epstein, especially after he was convicted in 2008, when in fact these files show that many, many years after he was a convicted offender, these folks were still reaching out to him in some various capacity.
Musk's continued denials about attending any gatherings, even after these emails became public, have only generated additional scrutiny. People are asking whether he is attempting to conceal something, or perhaps trying to protect someone else connected to the situation.
Elon Musk, he said that he refused to go to the island, and then in these new files, it came out, I think it was an email that said, "What day or night will be the wildest party on your island?" To Jeffrey Epstein. Howard Lutnick apparently went there with his family and then also had lunch with Elon Musk. Also filmmaker Brett Ratner, who just made that new documentary about Melania Trump.
Lunch with Elon Musk or lunch with Epstein?
Lunch with Epstein.
Yeah.
Lutnick had lunch with Epstein. But Brett Ratner also was in a picture with
Bill
Epstein
Gates,
and two women.
Bill Clinton, I mean, and those photographs of Prince Andrew, where he says he doesn't remember anything about Virginia Giuffre.
Then, seemingly out of nowhere, people began connecting Ellen DeGeneres to the Epstein narrative, characterizing her as a potential link between the entertainment industry and Jeffrey Epstein's world.
She didn't just visit the island. She Epstein's inner circle into the abyss, initiating them into the ritual consumption of human flesh as an ancient blood-drenched sacrament. Fresh, unredacted 2026 Epstein file dumps deliver the gut punch confirmation. Ellen ate her ex-partner Anne Heche, piece by cursed piece, after the actress was eliminated in that blatantly suspicious car crash, while she was closing in on the Hollywood pipelines. Investigators now confirm that after the accident, Ellen pulled strings to claim Anne's body, locked it in her mansion freezer like unholy relics, and consumed her former lover in slow, deliberate occult ceremonies over the years. This is not some twisted modern fetish. This is primordial evil, clawing its way back.
Some individuals have gone further, alleging that Ellen was present on the island and speculating about what may have occurred there. These claims remain unverified and highly contested.
Because there's so many videos of her going viral talking about how she wants to eat human flesh. There should be no desire for you to eat any kind of human flesh as far as I'm concerned. Like, I don't understand why you feel you need to, and you are in interviews talking about that you just, like, you keep talking about it. It's very weird. But, you know, we'll park her on the side for a second, which I know is difficult to do. But I do believe that the set on Ellen's daytime show is exactly what it was on the island, and they did this on purpose because of connections. Just because her name wasn't mentioned in the file doesn't necessarily mean that this woman was misunderstood or some kind of angel. I don't believe that. But the blue-white lines, you then have the trees on the back. This was definitely done on purpose, and of course she went along with it so that she can herself be successful.
Whoopi Goldberg felt compelled to address the allegations directly, stating unequivocally that she was not Epstein's friend, was not associated with him, and had never set foot on his plane.
In the name of transparency, can you put up, my name is in the file. It says, Whoopi needs a plane to get to Monaco. John Lennon's charity, it should say Julian Lennon's charity, is paying for it. People are trying to turn me into, I wasn't his girlfriend, I wasn't his friend.
You were too old for him.
I was not only too old, but it was at a time, you know, where this is just not, you used to have facts before you said stuff.
This is one of the moments that illustrates just how chaotic the Epstein file releases have become. Whoopi's position is that a name appearing in documents does not automatically indicate involvement or complicity. She stated that she never boarded the plane because doing so would have required her to fulfill certain conditions for Epstein's assistance, conditions she was unwilling to meet.
Like, really? Really, that's the thing that's making you crazy? You know, it's like, let's get realistic. When I tell you people are trying to turn me into, I wasn't his girlfriend, I wasn't his friend.
You were too old for him.
And no, I didn't get on the plane, because You know what I would have to do to get on the plane?
Fly.
They were trying to, yeah.
And she doesn't
they're
fly.
No, so they're trying
She's
to
a
get
bus
me.
baby.
They're trying to get me to get on a plane to get to this thing for Julian Lennon.
You think so? Here is the question that lingers over all of this. Do you believe the complete truth about Jeffrey Epstein and the people connected to him will ever fully emerge? Or is this destined to become one of those stories that remains permanently buried beneath redactions, legal maneuvering, and deliberate silence? Share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for continued coverage of the stories that powerful people would prefer went unexamined.